Vayse. Welcome to Vayse, a podcast about weird stuff. I'm Peter C. Hine, and joining me as always is my old friend and co-host. I fear saying his name out loud in case I attract his anger. If I see evidence of his mischief in my local area, I leave tofu and oat milk on a little plate for him outside my back door. And I never, ever accept anything he offers me to eat for fear of the terrible repercussions. It is the gentry. Or if you're brave enough, reckless enough, or stupid enough, it's Mr. Stephen James Buckley.
Thank you. Thank you for that lovely intro.
Yeah, you're welcome. I had to do that one carefully because I was trying to make sure that I didn't just repeat the same shit that I did for the intro for Joe Hickey Hall.
For the last time that you implied that,
that you were a fairy, yeah.
That's fair enough. So before we start, I'd just like to do that annoying podcast thing where we remind listeners that you can subscribe to us for the minuscule fee of $5 per month. These subscriptions are vital to keep the podcast running, and we do really appreciate them. For your money, you will receive monthly hour-long episodes of the PK Files, which is our exclusive podcast within a podcast for subscribers only. You'll also get access to our Discord server so you can talk weird stuff with weird people, including us, all day long, plus hours worth of unreleased bonus material and recorded conversations. You get all of this by subscribing at ko-fi.com/Vayse. That's ko-fi.com/Vayse. Please do consider it if you like what we do, because we'd love to keep this show running. I'm also pleased to say that we now have a YouTube channel, so please subscribe to us on there. It helps feed the algorithm and get us in front of more people. Go to @Vayse Podcast on YouTube and help spread the Vayse virus. So, with the sales pitch out of the way,
that was good. I like that. You're extremely professional.
I'm getting better at the sales pitch thing. Let's move on to our guest tonight. So, last year I watched a film that really felt like it was made just for me personally. It had synthesizers, mushrooms, the supernatural, some absolutely gorgeous locations, a complete breaking down of reality, and some of the best sound design I've ever heard in a movie. As soon as I saw the trailer, I knew I'd love it, and that instinct was correct. That film was Rabbit Trap, which is an intensely trippy, thoroughly disturbing fairy folk horror film that sits somewhere between psychological and psychedelic. And with us today, we have the director and writer of that masterpiece, Mr. Bryn Chainey. Hello, Bryn.
Hello, Bryn.
Hello. Hi. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure to have you here. Thank you very, very much for coming.
Yeah, we both absolutely love the film, and I know quite a few people on our Discord server had seen it, and just, it's incredible. If you've not watched it, just go and watch it.
Yeah,
right
it's
now.
for people in the UK, it's on Prime for a very reasonable sum at the moment, and I would absolutely recommend. I was saying to Bryn just before we started recording that I put it in front of a friend of mine at work who's not necessarily into the subject matter of it, but I said, I know that you will like this film. And he went and watched it that night. He actually called me halfway through, and I couldn't take the call because I was busy, but just to tell me how much he was enjoying it. The next day at work, I saw him, and he was like a changed man. He was completely shell-shocked and was so effusive about it. And then he clocked off at 5 o'clock and went home and watched it again, and then came in the next day with like clips of it on his phone, and he was showing me all of his favorite bits. It really is a film that draws you right in, and it is one of the best films that I've seen for a long, long time.
You're so nice. Thank you. Thanks for I found that really encouraging. And Stephen, that feeling of a movie being made just for you. I mean, that's amazing to hear. And I love when a movie feels intensely personal, not just like a personal from the filmmaker, but as if it's been made for like where a movie doesn't feel like it's made for everyone. It's made for a smaller section of people who are kind of on a particular wavelength, maybe a wavelength that most movies don't cater to or don't kind of tune in for. And so that's great to hear, because
Yeah.
that is the goal, you know.
It's true. I mean, definitely, it's like, I think a lot of our listeners, you know, we've talked quite a lot about the Fae, and so it's the sort of thing that our listeners would love. But then, you know, just from a general movie point of view, there's so much like beautiful stuff in that film. It's just like
I thought that every bit of it, like every little detail, you know, I mean, one thing that really bugs me is lighting in films in the modern day, you know, the Netflix style flat lighting, but the lighting and the set design was so evocative. It felt simple, but at the same time, just extremely atmospheric. It felt like proper filmmaking. You know, it felt like something I could really get my teeth into.
Yeah, was it filmed on? Was it done on like proper film? Is it something about?
Yeah,
it
we did.
Was...
We wondered it. Cause my mate at work was asking me about that. Whether I thought it'd been done on film, because it did look like it had that gorgeous quality.
It does have that quality. Yeah, we shot it on 35mm, which was an absolute mission. I mean, for a low budget movie like this, to convince everyone that we could achieve this on the budget and with the time we had was. That was a long journey to even get permission from the financiers to shoot on film, because there are implications if you're shooting on film to do with the insurance and the schedule and things like that. But it felt really important to make it on as much analog technology as possible, because it is a film about. The film is about a couple of artists, they're sound artists living in the 70s who move out to the Welsh countryside. I'm just doing this little synopsis for anyone who doesn't know what the movie is.
Yeah.
It's, you know, it's really about a married couple who are both artists, and it's about their exchange or their interactions with the natural and the supernatural that is kind of created through their relationship with their art and the technology they use to express their art, you know, which is, in their case, analog synthesizers and field recordings made on magnetic tape. And because of all that, I thought the movie needs to be made on film if we can, because this is a movie about capturing. I mean, these are characters who capture sound waves onto a physical medium, and that's kind of the point of the story. Is they catch something spectral and they bring it into their house physically through their technology, which is magnetic tape, you know? I thought, well, wouldn't it be great as if we can somehow create that same kind of exchange with the physical world through the shooting format, you know, like actually capture the light that happens on set on film stock, you know, and that way the movie is not just a mimic of what happened on set. You're actually experiencing the light as it fell, you know, and the shadow as it fell, which I think is that's a bit kind of romantic of me, but I am kind of a romantic when it comes to art, you know. I love the...
Yeah, why not?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know?
I think it's like it gives it... I think it almost adds to the kind of 70s feel of it as well. Like it gives it the feel of like a 70s film almost because of that, you know.
Yeah, that's true. We wanted the film to feel like it was really taking place in a real time, in a real place, which was mid 70s countryside Wales. And I didn't want to achieve that through... I know there is a kind of a version of folk horror movies and folklore films where you slap on effects and you kind of you have a bit of a self-conscious kind of nostalgic aesthetic to the movie, which I find really fun. But for this story, I didn't feel it was the right story for that kind of winking at the audience kind of aesthetic approach. I wanted it to feel more lived in and organic and like of a time and of a place. So
without being pastiche, like it's not like kind of Garth Marenghi's Dark Place or something like that. It's kind of
which I love. I mean,
me too. Absolutely,
But this is unfortunately not a funny film. I mean, Rabbit Trap has got there are bits where I wanted some levity and there's some very dark humor in the film. But it's a serious film about kind of hard things.
It is. There's a fart joke.
Yeah.
There is a fart joke.
There is, which
fart
which
is a
is
beautiful thing.
I think very well placed. Just gave it that lightness that it needed at that point. But I think that's a really good point about the pastiche idea, because it doesn't feel like a period piece, even though it is. I mean, the 70s were 50 years ago now, and we were talking before we started recording about The Big Lebowski, and people don't realize that was a period movie when it was released, even though the period was like 7 years before the film was actually released. But again, they don't slip into pastiche in that movie. They keep it. You watching it, you more feel the time that it's set in, rather than it activating what I think is kind of the borrowed pleasure of nostalgia when you get something like Stranger Things or even Garth Marenghi again. There was none of that in Rabbit Trap. When I say there's none of it, there was that cozy feeling that you might get in the 70s of that setting, but there was none of the borrowed pleasure, I don't think.
Yeah, right. Well said. Yeah.
It really made me want to just go out to the countryside and smoke loads of cigs. Like, it was one of the things. It just it really made me want to start smoking again.
My job is done. That is the best. Yeah. That is the best kind of review I've heard so far.
Yeah,
that's
it's just
great.
an advert for smoking, because I remember reading wasn't there some reason why you had to basically film it in Yorkshire rather than Wales, because they wouldn't let you smoke.
Yeah.
On set.
That got blown up a little bit. I mean, the BBC called me up. They wanted to talk about it, and I got all these angry kind of comments and messages from people saying, like, you prioritized smoking over shooting in Wales. But it was actually a number of factors that meant that we couldn't shoot in Wales. But one of them was a law there that you're not allowed to smoke in any workplace, which is the case of everywhere in the UK. But everywhere except Wales has an exception for theatre and film sets, so that actors can smoke like clove cigarettes, fake like non-tobacco cigarettes. But that isn't the case in Wales, and so we were told we have to use these e-cigarettes that are specially made, but they're only available from one company, and they're very expensive, and it wouldn't have. And it was like a mixture of that, and then we had to use CGI smoke. Apparently, it was explained to me in kind of a confusing way at the last minute, just after we'd lost our location in Wales in the first place. So we just decided to up sticks and keep searching elsewhere. And
it worked. The location is incredible.
Yeah,
like
Yorkshire is.
Yeah.
I loved. Oh man, I because the movie, it's a very contained story. It's just 3 characters in a cottage. But just outside the cottage, they need to be surrounded by such a variety of landscapes. There were scenes in a moor, there's some in a cave, and different kinds of forest terrains that we needed. And for such a simple, contained story, I wanted a lot of variety in the environments, and that is just a huge part of the kind of film this is. It's really much an environment landscape movie. Absolutely. So Yorkshire had all of it. I mean, it was amazing. Within a 1-hour radius, we had these kind of limestone flats, which are kind of like deserts of rock.
That was an amazing film as well.
I mean, with this this location where it's just this ocean of limestone with one rowan tree growing in the middle. That's been there for a few hundred years. It turns out people used to cut off a branch of a rowan tree and put it over their door to keep fairies out. Like, the rowan is also a significant part of fairy lore. And so that felt right. So I wrote a scene to fit that location.
That location was one of my favorites. It was just incredible. It was just like, it looked like something from, I don't know, it looked like a fantasy. It just looked
like something that someone would have spent a lot of money creating through CGI, like the fountain or something like that. Something that Aronofsky would have done.
It wasn't easy to shoot on because we had to it was pretty treacherous. Yeah. The actors and the camera team had to kind of hop from rock to rock to rock, and you're going to fall through if you're not careful. And it was very cold and windy, and it was a bastard to get there. We had to take 4x4s up through this very rugged terrain and then walk for a long time. But that's the kind of filmmaking I like, where it's a small team and you're out in nature and you're just looking for what is offered to you by the natural world, and then you collaborate with it. That's the difference between a studio film and a location film, is that you are in collaboration with reality, which is really nice, because if you're a writer, I spend most of my life indoors, thinking, writing, worrying, and so much of the filmmaking process happens internally, and it's all in fantasy. It's all part of the imagination. Whereas on set, you get to be in the physical world, and there are real problems like the weather and time, and where you can physically get the camera and get the team to. And it's just it's actually both liberating and restricting, because you just have to deal with what's in front of you, and it feels like you're not. I don't know. It's a less lonely experience somehow. Like being a writer is very lonely, but being a filmmaker is absolutely. You're being met constantly with choices that must be made, and that is. I don't know. I like that bit of it.
It really paid
I suppose
off.
that fits better with the kind of almost with like the plot of the film as well, and that part of one of the big themes of the film is nature, and is the kind of natural world. So the fact that you were embracing that and almost, like you say, collaborating with it, similar to how you're talking about the analog film, the way it was shot, you're allowing for there to be sort of this almost like natural and kind of non-curated kind of element into it that kind of it makes it alive, and it paid off, because it's just like that's it, like the locations of that film, the forest with the massive redwoods where the fairy ring was, and stuff like that, like it's like absolutely breathtaking, like the shades of green in it, and like
it feels organic, doesn't it? And I mean, Yorkshire, I have a fascination with Yorkshire. It's only an hour from where I live, and I go there quite a lot. And me and Buckley as well. It's got that weird character to the landscape, which I think Wales does have. And that was what was interesting, is that Wales, when I'm there, it's quite a haunted landscape. Wales is lush. You've got the forests and the beaches and everything. But Yorkshire also has that weird spirit to it. As soon as I go there, it feels different. And me and Buckley have walked all around Hebden Bridge, Todmorden, all around those sort of areas in the west, the north of west of Yorkshire, which is the bit that's closest to us. But it has got something magical there. And of course, chaos magic arose from Yorkshire in a large part. And there's a lot of folklore and mystery around Yorkshire as well. And there's something about, like you were saying, being out there in that environment with the analog film. You seem to have captured that spirit.
Yeah,
I hope so.
You've obviously got an interest in like the weirder side of things. Is that something that you've been interested in for a long time? Was there something that kind of got you interested when you were a child, or what's your origin story?
Well, I love that you guys are so comfortable with the word weird, and it sounds like you're using it in the same way that I use the word weird, which
compliment.
is not just it's a compliment, and that there are like there's a whole movement, there's a whole genre of fiction which is just before sci-fi was separated from fantasy and horror emerged, it was just called weird fiction. Right?
Arthur Machen, your movie Rabbit Trap reminded me of The White People. That was the closest experience that I've had to it. That feeling of being grabbed by the feet and pulled through nature the disorientation of it, the lack of understanding, the idea that something larger than you is operating and something ancient that you don't understand, that you stumbled upon, is being visited upon
exactly.
you. And that was what I tried to explain to my friend at work. I was saying the weird fiction, the art, the machin of it all. And it really did have that weird feeling to it.
Yeah, so I mean, give me your guys' how do you define weird? In your podcast, you've talked to lots of people who are touching it. What are some definitions that have come up for you?
The people we talk to are often involved in like kind of magic, some kind of spirituality, UFOs, just anything that's kind of, I guess, different, and anything that's kind of not. It's like alternative ways of looking at things, but not in a sort of horrible, racist, crypto-fascist kind of alternative ways of looking at things kind of way. But like, I think it's just sort of things that are. So like, when I talk about your origin story, and with like ours would be things like Ghostbusters and like the Osborne Book of Ghosts, things like that that when we were kids absolutely captured our imaginations and ended up sort of informing a lot of what we went on to do and be interested in as adults. And like, was there something like that for you, do you think?
I think of the weird as being a kind of deviation from consensus, really. In however you take that. So, whether it's, society or belief or religion or spirituality, I think a lot of it gets decided for us and forced upon us. And some people, and the people we tend to talk to on the podcast, are people who have, for whatever reason, deviated from that line that's being towed. And like Buckley was just saying, for us, that definitely happened at an early age through Ghostbusters, through the Osborne Book of Ghosts, and so on. There was an alternative way of thinking offered to us by those things. Yeah.
And I think, that's a great way of putting it. Because I think when the world and its, the world and its characters and its structures, when they're presented to you as something solid, as something that's predetermined, like this is how the world is, deal with it. When you're presented a world like that, there's nothing you can really engage with. You just have to receive it, and you don't get to discover the world yourself. And I think for me, the weird is it's a process of defamiliarizing the world so that you can then be re-enchanted by it, that you can discover it. You can discover it with fresh eyes or with a new curiosity. Like I think Tolkien talked about like that you need, like he didn't appreciate iron until he had like visited the mines of Moria, or something like that, where like, as in, if you can imagine these dwarves carving or smelting the iron and then creating these gates. Next time you see an iron gate, you really now can emotionally resonate with that gate, and you can go up and smell it, and you become more curious, and the tactility of the world becomes more exciting and full of story. And I think that is for me what the weird can do so well, is it re-enchants a world that is presented to you totally unenchanted, because those who control the world and give their kind of, like you said, the weird is about an alternative way of seeing the world. I think those in power and control want to just give people the world as it is, so that they don't question anything and they don't take control of it. They don't take ownership over it themselves. So I think there's a kind of a rebellious action. There's a rebellious nature in the weird as well, which makes it dangerous.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that strikes me from what you and Buckley have just said is that something that I haven't really realized about how I think about the weird is that the weird is something that's already there. So the weird's already there. You don't create it. You don't make it come. It's there already. And you're actually and it's something we've talked about a little bit in some of the podcasts we've done recently, you're actually taking stuff away in order to be able to see the weird that's already there. So the weird is everywhere, but we've been trained not to appreciate or see it.
Wow. Yeah. And I think now I can answer your question, like about what for me as a kid was my first spark of the weird that grabbed me. And it was Brian Froud's book, Fairies, which came out in the mid 80s. And I received that book, we had it in the house when I was a kid. And that book for me presents fairies and goblins and pixies and things, not as a intrusion of strangeness into the real world, but presents them as a natural element of the world. You know, the Book of Fairies by Brian Froud is more like a little encyclopedia. It's like a nature book. It gives you descriptions of what their behavior is like, what you should and shouldn't do around them, things not to say. And as a kid, I went through this book and saw these fantastical creatures that looked more like little deformed creatures and children, and they looked very earthy and natural and kind of blobby in the way that nature is. Man-made things are horrifically clean and sterile, whereas nature creates things in weird mutant forms. And the Book of Fairies that I read it at this age where I hadn't quite delineated fiction from quote unquote reality. You know, I was at the age where Father Christmas and God might still be real. And fairies were like that as well, where I read it and thought, these might exist. Well, I get a feeling in the woods that there could be these kinds of creatures. And that age where you are a bit more, where things are more malleable in terms of your beliefs, wherever you encounter at that age, whether it's Ghostbusters or a Book of Ghosts or a Book of Fairies, those things go in really deep. And I think crucially for me as a boy that grew up, at that age I was living in Bracknell in Berkshire, just in the suburbs. And my interactions with nature were very rare. We didn't have a garden. We had a tiny little lawn. My interactions with nature were pretty rare. But having that book and my image of fairies, it meant that when I did go into the woods, I had a reference point. I knew what to look for. I knew what to listen for. And it gave me bravery to explore nature and explore the woods and want to touch things and smell things. And like I was saying before about what I think the weird does, is it actually helps you move into the world and engage with it in an enchanted and romantic way, which was very useful for someone like me, who was an introverted kid that was full of phobias and insecurities, you know. So the weird actually helped get me out of my room.
You moved to Australia, didn't you, at a fairly young age?
Yeah. And that was an encounter with the weird, that's for sure.
Yeah, but do you think, because obviously, like in my mind, I've never been to Australia. In my mind, it's quite like a savage land, you know, like where everything's poisonous and might bite you or whatever. But do you think that moving to somewhere like that, being removed from the surroundings that you'd been born into, in a way assisted in romanticizing the elements of Britain and the British countryside and the British land and the spiritus loci or whatever it's called of Britain?
Yeah, probably. I mean, almost definitely to an extent. We moved. My family history was a bit more complicated. We moved back and forth from England to Australia and back again and back again and back again because of kind of family troubles. So I did get to. I wasn't in Australia all that long. But I did notice that, I don't know, like my dad is Welsh, right? Mum's English. My dad left Wales, in his 30s when we moved to Australia, and I think hasn't been back since. I don't think he ever left Australia. And his parents made the observation to me that the longer someone is out of Wales, the more Welsh they seem to become. You know, they do, like he would send them CDs of kind of allegedly Welsh, like Welsh harp music, and my grandparents being Welsh would be like, we don't listen to this stuff in Wales, but my dad definitely had a more romantic view of it. And I'm sure I was guilty of it as well. And there is something about leaving your home makes you long for it. It creates yearning,
Yeah.
which, I mean, the Welsh actually have a word for that, right? They have this word, hiraeth, which is longing for a home that you might never have actually known. It may not even exist. And that's a kind of a yearning that I think a lot of people can relate to. And I think their psychologists will have strong thoughts and hunches about why that might be for each individual. But it's a feeling that I certainly had even before we left the UK. I was like one of those kids who was kind of stricken with a melancholy that I didn't even know where it came from, And the weird is a comfort to those of us who have that feeling. And it's, I don't know, one of the best things about making Rabbit Trap has been encountering the people who are moved by it, have that pretty much all in common. That we are the ones who are not scared of melancholy, not scared of yearning. In fact, that yearning is what has led us to find each other, the kind of misfits and strange feral creatures of the world. I don't want to run. Yeah. I mean, yeah. So,
no, that's
I know, what are your thoughts on that?
That's really, really that's really kind of relatable, and I've kind of not thought about it like that before. But even sort of going back to the Brian Froud stuff, when I was a kid, I was obsessed with Labyrinth, which is obviously
the best,
heavily
Brian Froud.
Designed, that is my favourite film of all time, and I've got the Brian Froud Goblins book, which is similar to the fairies one that you've described, but with the goblins that are in the film.
Amazing.
And it does kind of present it like you say, like it's a little encyclopedia, like it's real.
Yeah.
And I recently actually picked up, this is kind of going off on a tangent, but I will come back. I recently picked up a similar book for it's the book that the TV series David the Gnome was based on, and it's like this beautiful, found it in a charity shop, and this beautiful illustrated book that talks about all the gnomes and where they live and which trees they live under and what berries they eat and stuff. And the David the Gnome TV series from the 80s was based on that. Right. And with all these things, so I feel like when I was a kid, and then later on when I was a teenager, when I was in my teens, I felt like Labyrinth was like an escape. It was like a almost like pretending it's real in a way, half real and half not. And I feel like, that sort of experience of, and I've never thought about it like this before, so it's really cool that you brought it up, that kind of experience of using the weird as an escape from the sort of cold and quite difficult to understand or live with, like, real world almost. Like if things are tough for you, and I'm not necessarily on about necessarily like it's a way out, and it's a fantasy, it's a way out, but when it kind of clashes with reality in a little bit, when it's presented in a way when this could be real, and like say Lovecraft does that in a way, the way Lovecraft writes is as if it's a document, as if it's an account, and that makes it all the more immersive because it's sort of presented as if it's real, but that's not a world that you want to escape to because it's terrifying. But like, the idea that sort of within this patch of grass or within this this woodland that's local to you, say in a fairly mundane suburban setting, there might be these little magical creatures. It just adds like a whole new kind of layer to life that suddenly becomes more interesting, more mysterious. And but also it's like it's not as scary. Obviously, your film is pretty fucking terrifying, but it's not as scary as some of the stuff that happens in real quotes life.
Real, yeah.
And I think just building on that, Buckley, I think that's a good point, because some of that you were talking about, the idea that actually some of this isn't as scary as real life, and actually some of this is an escape, comes back to what Bryn was saying about the idea of the melancholy, because the way that the consensus is presented to us is that we shouldn't feel melancholy, you know, that we should all be happy all the time, you know, we should strive for happiness, where actually melancholy, particularly melancholy that isn't necessarily from a single point of grief or sadness, it's just a natural feeling. And there is, I think, a connection between looking for this fantastical escape and that feeling of melancholy. There's that line in Donnie Darko where I guess that some people just have tragedy or some people are born with tragedy in their blood, you know, and that's got the feeling, because obviously Donnie escapes into that fantasy world, or possibly a fantasy world, yeah, exactly, of where he talks to the giant rabbit and so on. And there's this idea that I've talked about before, but not for a little while, called that I call numinous melancholy, which I mainly associate with Christmas because I was born Catholic and raised Catholic, and but it's that feeling. There's something greater. There's something that you're numinous, something awesome that you can't find or touch, but it comes also with this slight tinge of sadness to it. But that somehow makes the enormity and grandeur of the mystery greater.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I mean, I agree that fantasy in a way functions as an escape, but I think the best fantasy, it helps you escape whatever circumstances, whatever feelings or troubles you deserve to escape from. I think escapism is sort of used as a bit of a dirty word, which I think is really misjudged, because I think there are plenty of people who in their lives, they deserve a little escape, you know, or they would want to escape from circumstances or thoughts. But the best fantasy helps you escape from that cold, entrapment of a reality that has just been handed to you and told, this is how things are, accept it. You can escape from that using the imagination, and then that escape actually gives you tools, that fantasy gives you tools to re-engage with the world on fresh terms, you know? And that's what I think is the beauty of art in general, not just fantasy or the weird. I mean, there are experiences in real life, like as in, let's just call it like your interpersonal life, where, you know, people will make you feel things and they will do things and you don't know how to process it. The only way for you to process it sometimes is through a song. Like you hear a song and the song actually gives you the tools to deal with it. That song had nothing to do with the situation that you have to confront, but it's that escape and the fantasy, because music is, I think, the most ultimate fantastical art form, because it is so untethered from the physical hard reality, you know. But you can escape into that fantastical world of music, and it heals you in a way that is so much deeper and stranger and more ancient, if you want to call it that, or maybe original is a better word for it, than talking about it or going and confronting it in like head-on terms, because actually not everything can be dealt with through talking or dealt with through litigation. You know, some things need to be dealt with in a dark room with a candle lit, where you can sink into a feeling or you can sink into an alternative reality for a moment, you know? And I think that's what all art does, not just fantasy. Fantasy gets a bit of a hard, sometimes it gets, I think, overly criticized because fantasy does it more extremely than most other art forms.
Yeah, it kind of embraces it a bit more, doesn't it, with fantasy? It's sort of, I think
it's unapologetically doing it.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, I mean, we've talked a lot on the last sort of year or so on our podcast about LARPing and about how much.
Oh yeah,
of
are you
life,
LARPers?
No.
Well,
are we?
Not yet.
That's the
Not
point.
yet.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Let me hear
it's
this.
like a lot of the things that we look at, actually, we kind of realise that they are kind of almost like a form of LARP, which is not in any way to kind of denigrate them. It sometimes, in order to make things happen, you need to kind of almost pretend that you are this thing. Or, you know, that's to me, that's kind of similar to what you're saying about the the re-enchantment or the kind of adding the idea of the weird, adding like another layer to things and making things like you were saying with the iron and Tolkien and stuff like that. It's like it's the imagination, and it's kind of almost it's a powerful thing, and it's like I think kind of what you're describing kind of ties into what we were saying about LARPing in kind of previous episodes, in that it's sort of like it becomes an escape, but
it's an escape into reality, you know?
Yeah,
like
but it's also like, it can also be like a really, really good thing. Like, it's often harmless. It's often not harmless, like QAnon, but it's often like a way of like kind of just escaping from the world, but also kind of.
I think there's the difference I see between like freaky conspiracy theories. Conspiracy theorists are desperately trying to make sense of a world that has no sense, and that way is dangerous, because those are people who are trying to control the world or create a world that is controllable through understanding. Whereas those of us who are into the weird, you are doing the opposite of that. You're not trying to create a framework for the world. You're trying to accept the world without a framework, or trying to accept a world whose framework is changeable and is actually based on story and feelings and engagement rather than logic and cause and effect. You know,
Absolutely.
The possibility of reality not being based on cause and effect is kind of at the heart of the weird, I think, and I think that is what makes us quite different to the QAnoners. Although conspiracy theories are very interesting.
That's quite complicated, because I enjoy both, but I don't enjoy QAnon, but I do enjoy conspiracy theories, but almost I kind of have one foot in and one foot out, if you see what I mean. I don't fully engage with them as in I truly 100% believe this is, but I enjoy them almost as like a work of very immersive fiction.
Yeah. Yes. Same.
I think it's
but I think there's a lot of, I guess what I'm trying to say is there's a lot of crossover between that and fantasy in a way, but I think that sometimes the conspiracy theory doesn't admit that it's partially fantasy. Whereas fantasy knows that it is.
I think what Bryn was saying about the idea of creating a framework around things without cause and effect, I think that, you know, if you take cause and effect to be a consistent law or a consistent rule, then you either have to say that nature and the chaos of the world either breaks with that rule, or even more terrifying, that there's causes and effects that we can't even understand. And I think that when we're talking about QAnon, like you were just saying, Buckley, about, you know, like the damage that can do, it comes down to this idea that I've been thinking about quite a lot of, when you're creating a framework like that, a conspiracy like QAnon or whatever, you're adding onto what's already there. Whereas fantasy, I think in some cases, like what Bryn was saying about the iron and so on, you use your imagination, but you use that to take layers away. So you're actually seeing through all this framework, you're seeing through this consensus, and you're seeing the iron for what it actually is, which is this natural element that's being manipulated, rather than the concept that comes along with it of a gate. And once you have the idea of a gate in your mind, you look at a gate and think gate. You know, whereas if you subtract that layer of conditioning away, you look at it and you see a shape and you see a material and you see possibilities for that function. And that's where imagination can be something which, whilst not being reductive, subtracts layers of complication. Where did the idea originally come from for Rabbit Trap, do you think? Or can you put a spotlight on that.
Yeah, it's the very first origin of it is it grew out of a short film that I did in 2012 called Moritz and the Woodwoes, which is a modern day fairy tale that I made when I was living in Berlin. So it's in German. It's on YouTube somewhere. And that was a story about a boy who has a brother who is unwell. And Moritz, who's the healthy boy, he's really struggling to deal with that. And the home environment has started to feel emotionally very heavy because there is kind of sickness and death and fear in the house. And then he encounters a strange being that is trapped inside of a tree. And this being offers him a deal. He says, hey, if you can get me out of this tree and bury me, then I can grant you a wish. Anyway, that's the setup of the short film. And I made that, and years later, after I looked back at the film and I realized why I had to write that movie. And it was, without going into too many details, it was that my unconscious was actually trying to shake me and go, hey, you have some trouble accepting a particular part of your reality, your domestic situation, like I was having some kind of memory problems actually. And it's just very interesting. I don't know if you guys find this with the art that you make, but it sometimes is way ahead of you as a person.
Yeah.
Like it
knows what you need.
It knows exactly what you need. And so I made this short film, and years later I realized, actually the message was for me. And then once I clocked that, I realized that there was more layers for me to uncover, that I even just personally want to go deeper into what it is that I'm afraid to face. What is it that I'm having a hard time naming? So I used the framework of that film to start building a longer story, which became Rabbit Trap. Whereas instead of it being about a boy, it became about a man. But this man is also having a hard time admitting, facing how difficult truth is in his life and in his soul. And it takes the intervention of nature, and within nature, I include folkloric beings and supernature. I include that as part of nature. Nature intervenes to drag him towards a place of healing. And that was the very beginning of Rabbit Trap.
Yeah, I mean that was kind of my read of the film, was that sort of it was an experience he had, and that the couple both had really, which kind of almost healed them, but in a way that was not linear and not simple and not so like a simpler film would have that being a healing through nature that was painless and kind of simple, but this was nuanced, because almost like what is seen as being the almost antagonist of the film is also in some ways the protagonist. Not the protagonist, sorry. Is also in some ways the
healing force.
The healing force. Yeah. So that was the first time I watched the film. I didn't kind of pick up on that as much. I think I was more kind of just blown away by how it looked and how it sounded and stuff like that. But the second time I watched it, it became more apparent to me the mechanism of what happened there.
And the healing needn't be pleasant. It's quite brutal.
That's it. It's like it was very brutal. I mean, I think one of the things which for me, again, sort of the second time viewing it earlier this week, one of the things that really frightened me about it and really made me feel uncomfortable was the idea that there is something that comes into your space that you can't get rid of, and there is no authority or there is there's someone who is doing something to you, but there is no one who can stop them doing that. So say if the person that was, say if whatever was bothering Darcy and I've forgotten her name now, Daphne was, say, a big man with a knife. Okay, they could call the police, and the police would believe that this was a threatening man. But if it's a child, no one's going to believe you. No, there was going to be like, it's a child. Grow up.
And what are they doing to threaten you?
Yeah, what are they doing to
Nothing
threaten you?
really.
Yeah, that's it. And it was like,
It's the kid is taking you on nature walks and teaching you about
Yeah,
fairies.
yeah,
Like,
yeah, bringing you gifts.
There's nothing wrong here.
the kid is
Yeah.
bringing you gifts, and it's like
Take him to
it's
jail.
that. I guess it's almost like it's like a gaslighting thing, isn't it? In a way,
Yeah.
And it's like that fear of like covert, someone kind of almost covertly harming you, but
Yeah.
doing it in a way where, but it's so covert that no one can do. No one can do anything about it, and that to me is for me personally, that's what really bothered me about the that situation. And like, it's like I'd hate it if someone was coming into my house and I couldn't get rid of them. I absolutely hate it.
I'm with you. And I mean, as I was piecing together the story, I also wanted to you said that you felt like this movie was made for you. And like, as I was writing it at the beginning, I thought I really want to make this movie as my ideal movie. You know, I tried a couple of times to make a feature film before that fell through, and this was my third go. And I thought, well, fuck, I just gonna write my own favorite movie this time, because if it doesn't get made, at least I will have written something that I can imagine. And I love that kind of psychological horror that you described. It's something that I relate to a lot. It upsets me having a character whose boundaries are being pushed and taken, like not boundaries that aren't being respected, and kind of covert control, like you said, like emotional manipulation, a charismatic manipulator. These people scare the shit out of me. I don't really have all the tools to set up my own boundaries. So I thought this is going to be a major element of the film. And that's actually how I landed on the film being about musicians. Because I thought a lot about sound and why I find sound so extraordinary and weird. I find music and sound very weird in a good way. And it's to do with that exact thing that I'm scared of, which is that sound does, unlike your vision or your touch or your smell, which you can turn off and on. Like you choose to smell something, you choose to look at it, you choose to touch something. You do not choose to hear something. Like sound will enter your ear, like into the hole in your ear, which you can't really close, not like your mouth and your eyes. It's just open. And then the sound will come into your body and reverberate through you, vibrate through your bones and your water. And it's now in your body. It's not just in your head, it's in your body, you know? And there is an immense power in that. And that can sometimes be the words someone has spoken to you, and they can now live inside of your body without your permission. Or it can be a strange sound that's crept in from next door that for reasons you don't understand, your body now feels unsettled and off kilter. And it's actually just because the air conditioner next door is broken, but there's a particular frequency that vibrates you in the wrong way. It creates the wrong kind of cymatic pattern in your blood. So once I clocked that sound could be used as a kind of a intrinsic metaphorical power for consent and control and coercion, I was like, okay, these are going to be musicians, and this is going to be a film about boundaries being overstepped and about consent in a very subtle way, but like it being about consent in the fantasy elements and also in the psychological elements, Because I like it when a film has, when the elements of a film run all the way through it, where it's not just like a family drama. Oh, but there's a ghost. It should be that. Yeah. It should be. I like it when things are completely interwoven.
Yeah, I thought with the idea of them as musicians and sort of experimental musicians, it was very much almost like a proxy for them being like practicing like the occult or magic. It was like there was the way that they did their creation and the way that they made what they did was very, I thought anyway, kind of occult coded. And I think you get that
it's like they're like witches in the woods, right? They go out in the woods, they gather their sounds, they gather their materials, they bring it home, they put it together into a weird witch's brew, and out comes music.
It's alchemy, isn't it, in a way? But it's also kind of almost, it's got that thing of there's that kind of sort of idea of that almost Faustian thing of like you dabble in black magic, you dabble in this occult thing, and then something happens to you. You know, you play with a Ouija board, or you do some kind of invocation and something happens. And it was like that.
Yeah, what happens if you dig too far, you know? Like,
what happens if you go too far in sound?
Yeah.
You know, and it's like they were through sound, they were almost like tapping into some kind of secret message in the universe that kind of reverberated through them, and then it ended up kind of going into their psyche. And wow.
There's the idea that the feeling that you were talking about of that Buckley was saying was so frightening. The idea of the uninvited guest, and sound can be that uninvited guest, and the child in the movie is that uninvited guest. Nature becomes that uninvited guest, and that's where you sort of see the boundaries sort of collapse, because when Bryn, you were talking about boundaries and Darcy having his boundaries violated without his consent, and you can see something's happened to him in the past which has pushed those boundaries. But when nature comes knocking, the idea of a boundary between the human and nature is completely artificial, because we are nature. So the nature is actually a boundary which is completely man-made, you know, and something that we have no control over. So when nature comes in, the destruction of that boundary is actually what heals him, which is really fascinating.
Well said.
And there's that frightening element that Buckley was talking about. I mean, Buckley have talked about this loads, this idea of something without human morals, you know, the way in which nature, like Buckley was saying, heals Darcy in the end is against his will, and it's brutal, and it's not particularly nice, but it is what he needed. But it has no human moral, you know. It doesn't care whether it's nice, and it doesn't care whether it's nasty, because those elements are human construct. And that's also the thing that's so scary about the Fae and fairies and folklore, is that they're operating on a moral system which is completely different from anything that we put onto it. It's not law, it's not biblical, you know, it isn't run by the Ten Commandments or anything. It does its own thing.
Yeah, it does. And the more I researched, particularly Celtic fairy lore, because there are fairies that appear all over the world, and they all have different rules. I mean, I'm currently living in the Philippines, and they're very richly connected to their fairy folk here. It's a fascinating culture because they're kind of deeply Catholic, yet they also believe in nature spirits. And, you know, when you walk through the woods, even when you accidentally walk off the footpath onto the dirt, you're meant to say "tabi tabi po," which means like "excuse me, sir," or, you know, to the nature spirits, because you don't want to piss them off. But the fairies in the Celtic nations are very, like you said, they don't work on a moral framework that's the same as ours. The more I read about them, I really wanted to understand fairies psychologically, and it's really difficult because they're stories about encounters with fairies are wildly inconsistent. Their behavior is inconsistent. Sometimes they're really generous or benevolent, and other times they're more like tricksters and they're cruel, you know. And the characteristics I did land on for fairies is that they are transactional beings, and that they are like children, in that they have very poor emotional regulation. They attach themselves very easily, and their needs are immediate. Their needs feel like life and death, and that's what children experience. And so I decided to build my villain around this fairy, that kind of those three characteristics of fairies, in that it's I guess this isn't too spoilery because it's more about the themes of the film, but I wanted to also not present that as purely antagonistic. Like the fairy forces in this film are not the bad guy. They're also not the good guy. They're just the necessary. It's like a necessary. How about this? Like, in a way, Darcy and Daphne need to get in touch with their inner fairy self, those parts of themselves which fairies represent and which children represent, in order to move forward as a couple and as individuals. They have to recognize their own needs, and be willing to break the world in order to get there.
Whilst you were making the film, did you have any kind of experiences which were unusual or weird or kind of, because I guess like I like the idea of when you kind of tap into something, even if it's fiction, sometimes it can kind of bleed in. Did anything like that happen? Did any weird shit go down?
Not so much. I mean, we were very careful. I asked the crew to be very respectful of any natural environment we were in, like not pissing off any fairies that might be lurking around that area. We were nature was very good to us during the shoot. I mean, it was only a 4-week shoot. We had 20 days to make the film, and the first 10 days were outdoors. We did all the exteriors first. And I mean, Yorkshire is quite wet. Famously wet.
We're in Lancashire, so it's same.
Yeah. So, but we had basically clear skies for 10 days, except for the days when we needed overcast drizzliness. Like we actually had a great luck with the weather. And then the day we moved interiors, it just absolutely started pissing buckets every day. The outside of the set totally flooded. We had to have kind of boards of wood to kind of walk through the kind of mud, the kind of swamp that had been built. But actually, that's a small thing, but we really were not joking on set, but we're just grateful actually that the weather gods were pleased with us, because I felt like we had done the fairy people justice. I mean, one of my producers, Daniel Noah, he's a proper experiencer of the supernatural. He's really seen a lot of strange things, and he leans into it more heavily than I do. And he visited a psychic at some point in the last couple of years. And the psychic told him that, because he makes mostly films about the supernatural, and he makes films about the supernatural like Rabbit Trap, which aren't presenting the supernatural as evil. It's presenting it as
natural,
natural and having a personality, and the psychic said to him, he said, you are being followed and watched by many spirits, but they're very pleased with the way you're representing them. And he took that and was like, oh, Bryn, I think we're on the right track. Thank God.
That's cool.
Because I think that was very cool. Yeah.
I think, is it the first film that Spectrovision have done, the first feature film?
No, they've done this is like their 10th feature film, maybe.
Is it? Right, okay.
Yeah.
And how did you connect with those guys?
I started writing the film in around 2018, and that was when I was living in Australia. And I knew what kind of film it would be. It would be this fantasy, like a dark fantasy, more of a fairy tale film with a lot of tactility and melancholy and drizzle and mud and rain. And I knew it wasn't going to be scary in the traditional sense. I wanted to do a movie that was more about healing and about the heart. And there aren't that many movies like that being made. Mostly it's horror is made with more of an anger and a violence and a danger, and
it's why I don't connect with a lot of modern horror, because it feels like it's just there to be unpleasant, and it hasn't really got any heart to it.
Yeah. So I watched. I mean, the thing is, I do watch a lot of horror still, and I watch a lot of fantasy, and I was really looking around for who's making the films closest to what I'm imagining in terms of the spirit of the film. And Spectrovision are a production company they're based in the US. It's Elijah Wood's company. He started it maybe 12 years ago. Their first movie was called A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night, which is an Iranian vampire film. And all their films have this kind of touch of the supernatural, but they're full of heart. And they love people. The movies love people, and they love the supernatural. And it's not, they don't feel, they're dark films, but they don't feel dark at the end, if that makes sense. So they feel healing. So I knew I wanted them. But I was like, and actually the film they made that I really was blown away by is called Mandy. It's by Panos Cosmatos.
Oh yeah, it's awesome.
I didn't realize that was
amazing
Spectrevision.
film. Yeah. Nick Cage just on an insane revenge mission against a bunch of kind of demonic black riders, these kind of motorbike gang from the depths of hell. But it's actually a very beautiful, mournful film that is, I think it's really about returning from the depths of despair, within oneself, And also these guys, their music, their soundtracks are amazing. So I would recommend anyone who's into Rabbit Trap, go and explore Spectrevision's previous films, because the soundtracks are amazing.
I didn't realize they'd done that much, because I've come to them through podcasting. That's where I'm familiar with them from.
From Spectrevision Radio.
Exactly. I hadn't realized that
that's new.
So, sorry.
Spectrevision Radio is new. Like they started off as a film production company.
Well, I'm only just realizing that now that's actually gone that way around. I thought they'd gone the other way. I thought they'd gone from a podcasting network into movies, but obviously I've just missed the fact that a load of these really cool movies have actually been made by Spectrevision.
Yeah, I mean, they're amazing. They're real ones.
His previous film, Beyond the Black Rainbow, was that Spectrevision as well, or was that they reached out to him after seeing that. Because that is incredible. I love that film so much. It's just absolutely fucking...
Yeah, so I really wanted to get to them. At the time, I didn't have an agent, and my career was making short films, and I was, at the time, editing corporate videos. I was not like in Hollywood or in the industry in a very meaningful way. So I really didn't know how to get to them. But I went to a fantastic film festival in Sydney, and I watched their new film, which was new at the time, called The Color Out of Space, which is a Lovecraft
That's
adaptation.
A Lovecraft one, yeah. With Nicholas.
Really
Nick
fun.
Cage again.
Nick Cage again, yeah. Really fun. And I watched the credits like a hawk. Like, is there anyone I know in the credits at all? I sort of do that with every movie, actually, because from doing short films and traveling around the circuit, and I do know lots of filmmakers, but we're all at each other's level, which is trying to make a living out of this. So I'm always watching people's names to see who's getting there. So I'll be like, way to go, man. And I noticed I recognized one name in the credits who was a production assistant, like a production manager for the Portugal unit of the film. It's a filmmaker called Simao Kayat, who's also a director. And so I wrote to him. I was like, hey man, I saw your name in Color Out of Space. Is that you? Did you work on it? And he said, yeah, they shot in Portugal and I helped them. I hooked them up. I took the director to the dentist. Like, it was a bizarre experience, and so we got chatting, and then he was really kind and generous to kind of curry a introduction to Spectrevision. He read my outline that I'd done and agreed, they might dig this. It's worth a shot. So I was able to email it to them. And that was quite a difficult this section of the podcast is of the filmmakers out there, wondering how to get movies made. This is boring for anyone else, but he managed to slip me the pitch deck for Color Out of Space that Spectrevision had used to try to finance the film. And it's a pitch deck is like a little PDF with concept art and a director's statement and that kind of thing. So seeing that, my ex now, my girlfriend at the time, was a graphic designer, and so we put together a pitch deck for Rabbit Trap based on the Color Out of Space pitch deck, as in the way that they communicate, the way that they understand a film, and then we just made sure it was like 10 times better, like the most beautiful, undeniable document with concept art, location pictures. I wrote about the music. I made a playlist of music that would be inspired by the film. I'm positive Polypause was on that playlist, by the way.
Amazing. Brilliant.
Because I was like well into like, you know, Ghostbox Records, and I know you're not on Ghostbox, but like I found you from that circle.
I think there's definitely like a Pie Corner Audio vibe to Rabbit Trap. I really
hugely. I mean, I really listened to a lot of Pie Corner Audio while driving around the British countryside in 2020. Like that was part of the writing.
It's got that, like, that was the first thing I thought of. It's like Pie Corner Audio, the movie kind of thing.
And so I sent this deck to Spectrovision with the playlist and just crossed my fingers, you know, and did like a ritual to the moon, like, and then Samal sent me a text message that he'd screenshotted from Elijah Wood going, holy fuck, who is this guy? This is amazing.
Excellent.
So they were willing to take a call with me, and they just fell in love with the project. You know, it is a very risky proposition, like first time film from a filmmaker who's unknown. And it's a fucking strange movie with a strange structure. But they, as music fans, as analog tech nerds, as horror fans, as fantasy nerds, they got it on every level. And they were just like my champions from day one. I mean, it took ages to get the financing together, and to make the film was really difficult because of how small the resources are available for a film this strange. Because there are plenty of weird movies out there, but they're weird and somehow commercial. Whereas this film is definitively not commercial because it's not structurally a horror film. It's structurally a fairy tale in that it goes off the deep end into fable territory. And we all knew that going in, that most people are not going to jive with this. But we thought they were making this for the few people that will really, really love it. You know? And they never tried to pull me in a more conventional direction. They were so, I don't know. I just love those guys. I mean, this might sound like an advertising perspective vision, but the film industry is a really strange and difficult one, and that there are a few people out there who are holding on to the I don't know, like the convictions that you can do something that is beautiful and truly weird, and we're going to fight for it to the end. Like, I was so lucky to find those guys.
Oh, it's cool that they're doing that, because, you know, to be able to come to the film industry with that perspective of just like, holy fuck, who's this guy? You know, like and having the follow through to go with that is really cool, because we were talking a little bit again before we started recording about how treacherous the industry is, you know, and how not a lot of people have that conviction, you know, that even if they like what you're doing, they're going to balance that against commerciality, and you know, that the money's going to win in the end. But it's really cool that there's people out there who are championing proper creatives with real artistic ideas, which is great. And thanks for sharing all that, because that's a really interesting insight into.
I hope so. I realized I was okay.
No, I think that's really good, because you know, there's a lot of people who will have no concept of the world that you're working in and the difficulties that presents.
I wondered sort of are there any films or other kind of visual things which you felt were like an influence on Rabbit Trap?
Oh yeah, loads. I mean, interestingly, like it was interesting that we ended up shooting in North Yorkshire, because the biggest, considering that I'd also planned on shooting it in Wales, because part of writing the film was me wanting to reconnect with Wales. It's somewhere that I never lived. You know, I visited a lot as a kid because half my family is Welsh, but I wanted to move to Wales, get a Welsh crew, make it there. You know? But we ended up in North Yorkshire. But what's strange about that is that the main visual influence on the film was the 2011 adaptation of Wuthering Heights that Andrea Arnold did. Right, and that's obviously set in North Yorkshire, and and we shot the movie about half an hour from where the Bronte sisters lived. Yeah, we visited their house and
like around Haworth and that sort of area.
Yeah, really close to there. So yeah, Andrea Arnold's version of Wuthering Heights for me is like a perfect film. Like it's a movie where I can feel the mud, I feel the drizzle, the landscape it's such a cliche. People say the landscape is a character, but in Wuthering Heights, it's named after the landscape. You know, like it's not called Kathy and Heathcliff. It's called Wuthering Heights because it's about how a place has a power. You know, and it's about the spirit of a place and how it will haunt and infiltrate and seep through your clothes like sopping mist. You know, and so the way that the movie was shot was a big influence on us as well. Like having like a handheld camera, that being a lightweight crew, which means you can kind of grab details of nature as they appear. And there's a lovely urgency and intimacy to the way that film is shot. And it feels simultaneously really claustrophobic and intimate and also grand because it just has these landscapes, you know? So yeah, Wuthering Heights was a big one. I have a huge list of my influences because like I've been asked this before, like, and I put together a letterbox list of other films people can watch if they liked Rabbit Trap. So I can give you a link to that if you want.
We'll put that in the show notes.
Yeah.
So there's that, and Birth by Jonathan Glazer was a really big influence as well. That's got
Is it him that did he do Under the Skin?
He did Under the Skin. Yeah. So Birth
but
was his second film. That's one of the best creepy kid films of all time, but it's also very sad and supernatural and ambiguous. And Stalker by Tarkovsky. If you've seen that film.
Yeah. Amazing.
So, the kind of poetic, spiritual way of approaching a landscape and a story.
I never thought of that, but now it makes perfect sense. Like I just never put the two together, but like it's
a major one for me. Like I come back to that film a lot.
It's weird, isn't it? That film, the way it, I mean, I know that after I'd seen that, it permanently shifted something in my brain. And it isn't always a pleasant film to watch, you know.
No.
There's a weird, like, you know, one of the things that I felt watching it was, and this sounds weird, and it's maybe just me with my ADHD brain, but I felt impatience almost, like as those long.
It's a slog.
It's very slow. It's very slow.
And you're thinking, come on, just get where you're going, you know.
Yeah.
But that becomes part of what the movie is. That feeling.
Yeah, I mean, I've got Tarkovsky's book right in front of me. It's his book on filmmaking. And it's called Sculpting in Time.
Oh wow! Yeah,
and that's precisely that feeling of impatience you have. Is that for him, like the medium of film, the thing it has that's unique to it, in a way. Actually, I think theater has this as well. But one of the unique things it has to it is time. It uses time as its material. You know, light, sound, performance, and time. And the way that you create rhythm and mood and tension and release is part of the medium, you know? And I love the pacing of his films. I mean, you talked to Joe Hickey Hall recently. Is that? Did you mention that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, I don't know if she talked about it, but encounters with the fairies are almost always they happen in this rhythm and this mood, which is quite dreamlike, and like things don't move fast with the fairies. You know, like there's the enchanted feeling that comes upon people who have encountered fairies is quite a strange rhythm that is not fast, you know. And I wanted to create that feeling in the film that you should feel like you're a little bit under an enchantment, and that's I mean the last act of the film, without spoilers, is kind of fully in that fairy-led enchanted space where you are slightly under a spell. You're not fully under a spell, you're just under a spell enough where you are coming to meet the fairy forces halfway. And And I really wanted the film to get to that place where you are not fully in a dream, you're not fully in reality. You're in that woozy, stoned kind of middle ground where actually, if you've done any kind of like therapy and healing and like big cathartic experiences, that kind of half conscious, half in control, half dreamy, half state is really where the big emotional changes happen. You know, it's that kind of.
That's fascinating. Yeah, I'd never thought about it like that before. Like I kind of assumed in that part of the film there was some kind of enchantment going on, but that kind of explains it really clearly. Like,
well, because I mean, even when making it, I actually didn't have that full explanation. I felt it was correct to do the ending that way and to create that rhythm and to go there. I was fought by many people on it. Other people like everyone, it split people 50-50 on like, are we really doing this? Are we going this direction? And even a bunch of people on the film team were like, I'm out. This sucks. I hate it. You know? And other people were like, we're in. But it felt right. And it's only now looking back, I really can, I'm so glad we did it that way. Even though it did actually cost a lot in terms of how many people rejected the movie and reject that kind of storytelling turn. It cost a lot. Excellent. But if it hadn't cost anything, what's the point?
Yeah.
I mean, I remember like, I mean, I'm not a religious guy, but I am very interested in religious books and like holy texts. And one of my favorite Old Testament stories is, I think it was David brings a sacrifice to the temple, but it's a sacrifice of something he was given. He was given this thing, and then he goes to the temple and he gives it to God, and then God is like, "I'm gonna kill you, like I'm gonna strike you down. That's deeply offensive." He's like, "Do not give me an offering that cost you nothing."
It's the religious version of regifting.
Yeah, exactly. And
wrap it up again and give it to God.
Yeah, and like I feel this movie cost me a lot in terms of time, emotion, and there are definitely choices I could have made along the way which would have made the film cost less personally. But I've got something sadistic or stubborn in me that in that moment of choosing, like I got to choose what feels true to the film. I need to follow this film to the end of itself, even if I suffer because of it.
I think that's just clarity of vision, isn't it? You know, because compromise can be good, but it can be also destructive. You know, and part I think of what makes good art is knowing when to compromise and when not to. Because we've all heard albums, you know, of great artists who, in stubbornly not compromising, they made something which isn't good. And then you've also heard the same from great artists or even artists who became great because they learned when they shouldn't compromise. I think of, with this, which is an odd example, but I think of Kesha when she did Gag Order, which I think has now been renamed Eat the Acid. You know, and she basically poured all of the terrible things that have been happening with all of her legal troubles and stuff into this one album, which stands out to me as being the greatest thing she's ever done by a long way.
Yeah, it's amazing.
But she did that by not compromising on what the idea was and what people were, you know, it was a rebellion against being Kesha and being part of this legal thing. But, you know, you can see it the other way, you know, where great artists like Bowie or, you know, I mean, the list is endless, isn't it? Just make an album which is really dross because they become so involved in their own, they're unedited and they don't think they have to compromise. So I think clarity of vision is being able to see when compromise is appropriate and when it isn't.
Yeah, I think the best example of that is Prince, isn't it?
Prince,
like, Prince, like Billy Corgan, like just people who are immensely talented and have made absolutely amazing art, but sometimes probably need to compromise a bit and just not do that 3 CD album that's like, you know, just kind of really pleased with it.
It's really hard to tell in the moment. You actually can't. You don't know whether you're making crap or anything good. Like and also the thing about art is, I mean, half the people who will, you know, watch Rabbit Trap will say, yeah, he should have compromised because this is garbage. And half will go, thank fuck he didn't because this is great. And time will shake out, kind of where it lands with people. But yeah, man, I don't know how we got into that. It's a scary one because I also assume I'm making crap until then there comes a moment where, I don't know, like on set, I was just so proud of also what my actors were doing and proud of what my crew was putting together. I could see the cinematography as it was happening, the production design. Like, I love my production designer, Lucy Red, and her team. They just poured so much love and like dedication and time into it, that on set, I was like, there was so much joy from the heads of department and the actors that I was like, well, we're on, even if this isn't ultimately going to please everyone, this is a joy to be bringing out what I think is the best work possible from these people. This is part of the fun of the collaborative nature of being a director, is that like my job is to do whatever I can to help my crew do their best work and to fully express themselves and to reach a place of excitement and danger and fear and satisfaction. And it's not just my film, it's like a collection of people bringing forth what they've got to offer.
Good art is divisive, isn't it? And I think something that everybody likes is usually a sign that it is compromised too far, and it's become something that's a bit more lowest common denominator, whereas really good art, I think, will divide people. I thought that the performances of the three lead actors in that, or the only actors in it, were absolutely incredible. I thought that they were so spot on.
They were all very good.
Incredible.
All very good. Jade Crute was like, I can't think of anyone else that would have played that role like her, kind of the way she did certain things with her face and like the way she looked and everything. Like, it was just incredible.
She's amazing. She's an absolute force of nature. I mean, and also so fun and strange as a person, incredibly kind and like the closest thing to an actual little goblin you'll ever meet. She's.
I was going to say, literally a force of nature. Like, that's kind of what she was in the film as well.
Yeah.
So
she's so sweet and mischievous and like curious about things. I mean, she would like, her favorite performance ever is Anthony Hopkins as Hannibal Lecter in Silence of the Lambs.
Okay.
And he's her favorite actor, and that's her favorite performance. And on set we would kind of we would like between takes we'd have a chat, and she'd be like, "Okay, Bryn, how much Hannibal Lecter should I dial in for this take?" And I was like, "Okay." I was like, "Let's go a bit further." She's like, "I've got you, bro. I've got you, bro. I've got you, buddy." And then she'd jump in and then just go dead-eyed.
I love that.
There was parts where she was very scary. And parts
truly scary.
And parts where she was a sweet little child.
Yeah.
And it could turn on a it could just flip.
Like real kids. I mean, the vulnerability that she was able to manifest, which is very childlike. But when children are super vulnerable, you say just the wrong thing to an upset child, and they will just start howling at you and screaming at you, and they turn vicious. And I think Jade really tapped into that, like primordial vulnerability, which could flip to violence on a dime.
Yeah, there's that bit when I think Daphne first locks her out, and that's the bit that my friend at work was bringing in to show me on his phone. And she looks despairing, and then just before the scene cuts, there's something comes across her face.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, and it reminds me so much of just when you feel the wind change. It's got that very, very it's so in touch with the feeling of the whims of nature that it's just absolute. It was such an incredible performance.
Yeah, she's exceptional. She's about to be in the new movie by Michael Sarnowski, who did Pig. His new movie is The Death of Robin Hood. That's coming out soon.
Oh,
she's in that.
I've seen the
She's got a
trailers
major role in that. She's really exciting. She's amazing. She's a star.
think now would be a good time to talk about the sound, the music, because I think that's a huge part of the film. The first time I watched it, I mutually followed Graham Resnick, the sound designer, on Instagram, and I was aware of his work. And I knew that he was into what I did, and so we had like a mutual admiration. And I had no idea that he'd done Rabbit Trap. So I'm watching the film, and I'm watching the credits. I didn't need to see who's done the sound design and music on this, because like you were saying when so the credits roll after the film. I'm like, fuck. I said to my wife, like, let's see who's done the sound design. Graham Resnick's like, I know that guy. Like the meme of Leonardo DiCaprio pointing at the telly, like that was me. Yeah. I was like, I know that guy, so I contacted him. But yeah, the sound design and music, the way they worked was absolutely insanely good. Like just the way that it sounded, so eerie but so natural, and obviously kind of the one of my favorite bits of Stalker is the part where they're on the on that kind of rail train kind of thing, going out to the zone. It's the zone, and the sound of the kind of sound of the train and the rhythm of it eventually very, very slowly turns into music. It turns into like the rhythm of the music, and that blend between where sound design and music kind of meet is there's loads of that in your film, and that's kind of almost the plot of it as well, because because Darcy is the guy who's collecting the sounds, and then Daphne turns them into music. So it kind of really reminded me of that part of Stalker. And I mean, is it what? How did it work with the sound design? Did you have stuff in mind, or did you kind of tell them what to do, or how did that all work?
So in most films, you have this pretty linear track where you go images, you shoot the movie, you cut the movie, and then when the story is locked and the edit is locked, then you go into sound design, and then you work on the sound design, and when that's finished, you then give it to the composer, and then the composer will add music. This movie, it wouldn't have, I didn't want to do it that way, and I don't think it would have worked that way, because there is a character who performs music on set, and that music is influenced by the sound that they capture, on set, and that sound has to be influenced by the environment we're in, and what kind of set we can build will determine what kind of instruments she would use. And so we, what we did differently is that we had Graham Resnick, who's the sound designer. He had been hired, I think, before we'd finished casting the movie, and Lucrecia Dalt was the composer. She was hired long before we shot the movie. And they began work before we were on set even. So Graham had started building strange soundscapes of like birds, and he would take recordings of birds and then play them out to a cassette tape. And then he had this device where he could fuck with the timing of the cassette tape and kind of wobble it.
I know the one, the landscape. Landscape noon thing,
How did you know that you'd be able to trust? Did you handpick them, or how did you know? Because it occurred to me when I was watching it that the trust,
Graham and Lucrecia?
The trust you must have had in the sound design and the music, because it's such a crucial part and plays into the story in such an organic way. How did you generate that trust with them?
Okay, so good question. So with the composer, Lucrecia Dalt, while I was writing, the main writing happened between 2020 and 2022. That was when I was writing this draft of the script. I was living in Kent. I was living in this little, very old cottage in the countryside of Kent during the pandemic. And I would go these long walks with my dog out through the woods and listen to music for hours, because I was thinking years before we shot the film, I need the right composer for this movie. The composer has to be it's as important as the lead actors for this film.
Yeah, definitely.
And I knew I wanted it to be a woman, because the character of Daphne is a composer who's based on some real women like Daphne Oram and Delia Derbyshire, Suzanne Kiani. The history of electronic music, Buckley, you could probably speak to this better than me. But the history of early electronic music is really the story of women who were not given space in traditional music spheres, like at the BBC and different composer spaces. They're like, okay, well, we're not officially allowed to be composers, but we can be sound designers. So they started creating really bizarre music that was more sound design using these new instruments. And I just love that history. There's a really good documentary about it called Sisters with Transistors, which is worth watching.
Yeah, it's great.
So anyway, because of all that, I knew the composer had to be a woman, and she had to be, a genius, and also make stuff that was using technology of the time. I didn't want someone who created fake analog electronica. It had to be real.
Just like a tape plug-in on Ableton or something. It's like it's not
not quite the same. Yeah.
No,
not quite the same, and you can feel it.
Definitely.
Yeah, really, for like 18 months while I was writing and walking every day, I was listening to thousands and thousands of artists at different albums. Like I said, Polypores was one I listened to a lot. I listened to a lot of Ghostbox records, and I was making these long, long lists of any composers who might be the right people. And then, I ended up like, once the film was starting to move forward and we were getting some financing, we were able to set up like phone calls. And so I talked to like a bunch of these women who were musicians and composers, and we just talked about the script and the music, and until I found the right person where we just had like Lucrezia and we just straight away got along really well. She communicates in a way that I get, and vice versa. Her references were bang on and even more interesting than the stuff I'd given her. Like, we started sending folders of music back and forth to find the sound of Daphne, the character, and the sound of the film. And that means instrumentation, rhythm, mood, different genres. And so we built up this relationship long before official work began, where we knew what the music was before it was written. So that was a great process, and she was so grateful for it. She says usually she's only ever just been brought in after the show or the film was cut to add music, whereas she got to define the sound of the film, and then also was influential with the production design, because the character of Daphne makes music in her studio, which is all just real vintage sound gear. And so she was able to talk with our production designer and with our analog music wizard, a guy called Sam Battle, also known as Look Mum No Computer, who just repped the UK at the Eurovision this week, which was wild. This guy, he has this museum in Kent, in Ramsgate, a museum of obsolete instruments that he calls, this museum is not obsolete. And I went to visit him, and he's just this amazing, sweet, like, encyclopedia who builds crazy synthesizers, like flamethrower synthesizers and Furby machines. And so we got along really well, and he got involved early. So he and Lucrezia and Lucy Red, the production designer, together they designed the studio that you see in the film. And that studio helped define the sound of the music in the film. This is a process that just doesn't happen usually in movies, where the composer influences production design. And Lucrezia also worked with Rosie McEwen, who plays Daphne. Rosie was so dedicated. She was like, I want to talk to musicians. I want to learn how to use this studio. So she went to visit Sam in Ramsgate to learn how to use the gear. She had a Zoom call with Lucrezia to figure out how to move her body while making music. Where is she feeling it? And so it was all like everyone was getting involved with each other's departments. The actor was being influenced by the equipment, and the equipment was influenced by the composer, and it was more holistic.
That's cool.
And Graham was a part of that as well. Less so, because his work was a bit more. Sound design is more. It's the most ethereal, changeable part of a film. Like he designed a bunch of soundscapes that we played on set, and that Lucrezia could use and build music from, and we used in the edit. But also when we get to sound design at the very end, it was he was also able to create things from scratch. And I mean, that could be. I could talk for an hour about how the sound design was built. The short version is
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll not talk about it for an hour because our listeners,
Okay.
I would enjoy it, but
Yeah, okay.
In terms of the music that's in the film, as in the music that the child sings and that kind of thing, does that come back to what you were talking about earlier about because I've read quite recently that they think that probably language came out of song rather than song coming out of language. So I read this report, and I can't remember where it is. I'll try and find it to put in the show notes, about how they think that almost like rhythmic utterances early on in human civilization built language that kind of came that way, rather than words being put to music. So music predates language, but there's without giving away too many spoilers, there's a pivotal moment about a song that the child sings, which seems to be a bit of a kind of turning point in the movie. Do you see that? I mean, we talked about it a bit earlier, but you see that connection between music and magic as something that's... Do you kind of believe in magic or anything like that? What's your take on it all?
I love that your question naturally, by asking me, do you believe in music? You have to ask, do you believe in magic?
Yeah, they're so intertwined though, aren't they? You know.
Yeah. I mean, yes, I believe in both. I'm not sure what either of them really are. I don't really know what music is. I don't really know what magic is, but I believe in them both. The fact that you're not going to find a religious movement on the planet that doesn't have music, that tells me a lot.
Yeah.
I had a very intense religious phase when I was a teenager. For 5 years, I was a really intense born-again Christian. And it was really, I don't regret that part of my life. I don't want to talk badly about it, but it was something that I needed to go through, I think, to kind of survive a really rough my teenage years. Anyway, the music was actually a key part of what got me into religion at that time. That it was the intensity of the worship, and it was the how music taps into something pre-language. I do believe that music, it makes a lot of sense if music predates language, because I've always thought of music as something pre-language. You sing to a child before you guess you talk to a kid like, how are you, la la la, but the kid is not interested. But you sing a song to a kid and they're enraptured, and you can feel the direct connection with them, before they learn. Anyway, so I think spirituality and music, I had a first-hand experience of how entwined they were. So yeah, that was something I just felt is natural to put in the film. That if there's going to be a real spell, it should just be a song. And a lullaby is a kind of spell. It's a spell that you cast on a child who's afraid of the dark and doesn't want to be left alone at night. So instead you leave them with a song, and the kid is then given through the song the comfort and the bravery to spend the night alone in the dark, to enter the dream space without the parent. I think the lullaby is such a powerful spell. So that felt correct. The second part of that scene was just simply, for me, there is nothing more uncomfortable than somebody singing a song at you.
Yeah.
Not for you, but at you. When my worst nightmare is, you're at a restaurant and people come out and they start singing "Happy Birthday to you," and everyone's looking at you, and they "Happy Birthday to you." It's killing me. That kind of eye contact while they're singing to you is for me
the ultimate example of that is, have you seen Extras when David Bowie starts singing at the character? Cherry little loser, straight into his soul to soul.
The fat man takes his own life.
It's also the same reason I find open mic nights for music really uncomfortable. I can't do it. I can't be there. There is this kind of urgency of need of please pick me, love me, when someone sings for you, at you. I find it so uncomfortable. So I wanted to put that in the scene, that the kid sings to camera, and it's deeply uncomfortable, I think. Hypnotic and uncomfortable. So there's the shallow reason and the deep reason for that scene.
Sounds like a spell.
Sounds like a spell.
Yeah.
And then Daphne says, "So what if it is?" And that shows the difference in their attitudes. Darcy's someone who's afraid of going into a spell state because of what he might find there, or he's scared of losing control. Whereas Daphne, who's more of a brave musician, she's a real true artist. She's like, fuck it. If it's a spell, let's see what's on the other side. You know? Yeah. So she's a much braver person than Darcy.
Obviously, there's a very, very strong connection in Rabbit Trap to fairy tales, folklore, fables, that kind of thing. And what struck me whilst I was trying to think of what direction to take this interview in and that kind of thing, I was thinking about how fairy tales, fairy stories, and fairies themselves are really left out of modern paranormal and supernatural belief, where ghosts are still very prevalent. UFOs are everywhere at the moment. They're a really big thing. Cryptids, there's still people searching around for the Loch Ness Monster in a little lake in Scotland. And by the way, I've walked.
It's not that little. It's pretty big.
Well, it's big for UK. It's little for say like Canada or something.
It's not like Lake Michigan.
Yeah, but
it's
then
too little to
have a monster
sustain a fully grown monster.
But I've walked through the forests of the Highland, and they're teeming with fairies. It's teeming with fairies. That you can feel them. They're there. There's no doubt. There's something, and yet fairies really have become ignored. And so I was wondering if you had any ideas of why that might be, and also what you think about the ideas of people like Jacques Vallée and Joshua Cutchin and people who think that, well, actually that folklore has been adapted to our own needs and our own time and is now UFOs and aliens and that kind of thing.
I think there's probably a lot of truth in that, that fairy tales would be a manifestation of the fears and the discordance in belief of a particular time, the clashing of beliefs, when there's no way of them to fit, they emerge through the gaps, and then they take on new forms. I think that's probably true to an extent. If you want to look at paranormal experiences as, metaphors or as psychological emergences, I don't know. If you want to think of them as actual beings, if the fairies are actual beings, I would be amazed if many survived the industrialization of the UK. They would have been pushed very far into the edges. But actually, in terms of why there isn't much fairy lore or fairy tales in the kind of cultural, in the zeitgeist or in the kind of cultural tapestry of things, I think it's partly to do with structure. Like fairy tale structure is quite different to filmmaking and like Hollywood story, 3-act structure kind of telling. I think fairy tales are more unruly, more feral than people can handle. They go off in directions and then don't come back again.
Yeah, there's no need. They don't get tied up in a bow.
Yeah.
Not really, no. And the wrong people get punished sometimes and the right people get away with it. And I think also the inner child has not been cultivated in grown up, quote unquote, grown up culture, that we're afraid of things that appear childlike or childish. And fairy tales are about that inner child. They, you hear them as a kid and they touch some place that is more archetypal and innocent and wide-eyed. But I think fairy tale structure, at least, or fairy tale as a genre, does absolutely have it can absolutely serve you as an adult. It's just if your inner child has not survived into adulthood, it's very hard to appreciate fairy tales.
It's interesting because I wondered, whether it comes down to the human, and you did touch upon this when you said about the Industrial Revolution, but I wonder if it's about the humans' separation that we talked about earlier between nature and the human, because when you're removed from the natural environment, if you don't go walking in the woods, if you don't live in a time where you see proper darkness and you can see the stars, that's all stolen by electricity. These archetypes or beings or manifestations of whatever spirit it is literally become wrapped up in technology, like a UFO, a ship around the creature which is inside, which is the alien, which when people have these encounters with an alien, not a UFO in the sky, but something that lands and comes out, they switch straight back into fairy lore. They offer them something to eat. They ask strange questions. There's injuries. Some people go blind. Some people get burned. That kind of thing.
Yeah.
But the human consciousness now is forced to put that into a schema that fits more closely to the way in which we live, perhaps.
Yeah, probably. And I think you talk about nature and landscape. Like Tolkien has an essay about fairy tales, and he talks about fairy not as a being, but as a place. And fairy is actually an environment, and I think it's a psychological environment where full of enchantment and possibility. And I feel the only place I feel equipped to talk about, or that I'm even that interested in, is that kind of psychological, emotional, spiritual, numinous place, which is capital F fairy. And that is a place that most of us don't have opportunity to go anymore. And maybe all of us unwilling to go to most of the time. It's somewhere that, connected to what we were saying about conspiracy theories, like people who are into UFOs and Bigfoot and Nessie, and they're trying to find them, they're trying to prove them, for me, are missing the point entirely. That it's the ambiguity, it's the possibility, it's what the possibility of the fairy world opens up in you. It's the portal into your unconscious that fairy opens up. That's the only bit I'm personally super interested in. As soon as someone starts talking about like UFOs and like, is it real or is it not? I'm less interested than like, okay, but what are the consequences for you emotionally if UFOs are a possibility? Like, what does it do to your life? What does it do to your soul? How are you feeling, man? How are your toes right now? Like,
absolutely.
For me, it has to go inwards.
I bought a book about that very thing yesterday about basically if UFOs exist or if they don't exist, what does that mean for humans, for philosophy, for, not what does it mean as for the race? Are we going to reach to the stars? Are we going to get all this new technology? But what does it mean to us? What does it mean to our soul? What does it mean to a human being to know that there is something other? And that kind of thing. Yeah. It's only a short book, but it looks quite interesting. I'll put it in the show notes.
I think some of it also with the fairy thing and the UFO thing is to do with almost like frontiers, and like the idea that sort of a few hundred years ago the landscape was a lot more of a Wild West, so to speak. There was a lot less built, there was a lot less houses, a lot less people, and there was a lot more woodlands and places where that weren't explored and weren't so they were easy for people to kind of almost project these because there's something unknown and something, and that's not to say I don't believe in it. I try to stay agnostic if I can, but like if you can imagine from like an agnostic point of view, it's like, or from even like a true believer point of view, it's like they can exist in this place where there's a mystery and where there's a degree of unknown. And when everything is known, then we need a new frontier, which is space.
Yeah, almost like they're being pushed, like
space or consciousness, or
which
the
are connected,
of our minds
obviously.
and and so like I feel like there's kind of a relationship there.
Yeah, that's a great point. The more we know, the further we have to push them into the fantastical or further away from us in order for us to be able to keep them within the zone of mystery.
Space fairies. We need a space fairies movie for sure.
Yeah,
well, that's how you could do it.
But which is the Lovecraft one, Buckley? When the creatures, there's a few of them, but there's that guy who lives in the house, and the creatures just fly straight in from outer space. And is it Whisperer in the Dark?
I can't remember now.
I think it's Whisperer in the Dark. When the creatures are basically just like flying things that fly through space, and they just come to Earth.
I find that terrifying since I've read it.
There's no craft, there's no ship. They just travel through the darkness of space on their own, and then land on Earth, and it's nothing to them. Terrifying.
Lovecraft, man, he was fucking onto something. Like.
What's next for you, Bryn?
Well, I'm writing. I think like every filmmaker doing their debut, I really had hoped that I make the first feature, and then the phone just blows up, and I'm getting all these offers to direct things and make things. And I think that's probably true for like 1 out of 1,000 filmmakers. But the rest of us, the movie goes out, and then some people like it, some people don't, some people love it. And then the doors unlock, but they don't necessarily open. No one shows up saying, "Hey, come inside and make a movie." So I'm in a better position than before making Rabbit Trap, in that this time I'm getting paid to write a movie, but I still have to write a really good movie and then go through the whole process of financing it and making it. So I really hope that process works, because I would like to make more feature films. And the stuff I'm writing now is still in the kind of fantastical space. I'm still very interested in like where the internal and the external worlds commingle. I like that kind of storytelling. So I really hope within the next couple of years there'll be a second film. I'm writing it
too.
Excellent. Yeah.
Do you have like a long-term plan, or are you sort of taking it? Are you able to do that? You know, is there anything that you're particularly building towards, or anything like that, or do you have a set point or goal or anything like that?
My goal would be, I've always wanted to make feature films, like movies. I like movies more than TV. I like TV, but I love movies. And I would like to keep writing and directing my own work. But I'm also open to adapting books and directing other people's scripts if they really move me.
Would you do a Marvel movie if they came knocking, do you think?
They're not going to come knocking.
You never know.
You never know.
Never know.
No.
I know that Kevin Feige listens to Vayse.
Oh, really? Okay. Well,
you know.
It really, I think it's very hard to turn those things down. I mean, after Rabbit Trap, I got to have some really great meetings with people, with some producers who had seen it at Sundance and loved it. You know, like I got to go to the Jim Henson Company, the Henson Workshop. Nice. They're absolute heroes of mine. You know, they did Labyrinth, Dark Crystal, those things. One of my dreams is to work with them one day. And they loved Rabbit Trap. So we're talking, and one day we'd like to work together, but we just have to find the right projects. And so I got to go into like Lucasfilm and talk to the Star Wars team about like what they do, and they loved Rabbit Trap, but it's like, we don't know what you can do, you know, with us.
They don't know what they're doing. I think with that. I mean, I don't want to be, you know, obviously you don't have to comment on that because but we'll keep you out of this. But I love Star Wars, but they are a bit, they have lost their focus a little bit.
But the challenge, I love fantasy, so like, and I love Star Wars, so I was able to go in with like, here's what I would do if I was allowed to do anything in the Star Wars universe. So I told them my idea, and they liked it, but they're like, that's fucking weird, we can't do that, but it's great. I'm just hoping to keep making films, small scale. My goal is to not have to do other jobs other than filmmaking, to be somehow not afraid of my rent every month, which is hard. Just to make a living as an artist would be great.
You just
And
never
I
know.
will find ways.
But very, very early on, when I was working at the BBC, I was a production runner, and we went and for the Culture Show interviewed Gareth Edwards, and he was in a tiny, pokey little flat in Vauxhall, and he showed us the like models that he'd used for monsters to make those animated tentacles and stuff. And he was very friendly. I barely spoke to him as usual. Then I had to hide behind a sofa and bring people cigarettes when they wanted them. But I mean, like 2 or 3 years later, Rogue One, which is one of the best Star Wars movies. And who would have thought that for Monsters? I mean, Monsters is great, but
it is.
To get something like Rogue One, which is so different, so such an actual really good piece of filmmaking within the Star Wars universe. So I mean, I think there's always possibility for the people who have that clarity of vision. It comes down to that compromise again, doesn't it? The compromise. I mean, what you were talking about, I think, and obviously as someone who's not connected to movies in any way, the heart, finding the heart of it, I think is the 90% of the battle in something like that, because the best Star Wars movies are the ones that have that heart.
I agree.
There in it. So do you, we usually ask our guests for any recommendations, any books, movies, podcasts, TV shows, documentaries, anything like that you would recommend to our listeners if they enjoy your work or they've enjoyed this chat today?
I've just been rewatching The Storyteller from from Jim Henson. You guys watched that as a kid?
I've never seen that.
Yeah.
Oh man, it's so great. So it was Anthony Minghella wrote all of them. He was an amazing filmmaker, and it's this dark fantasy series, for kids, but you can enjoy it if you're an adult with a live inner child. John Hurt plays this storyteller, and he's got this puppet who's a dog who's a puppet, and they just tell kind of really excellent dark retellings of fairy tales from across Europe. That's called The Storyteller. That's I'll be watching that on Canopy, which is available in the US. I think it's on Prime in the UK. So I would say The Storyteller is amazing. Definitely watch the 2011 version of Wuthering Heights if you haven't. I think it's one of the best British movies ever made. The other big influence on Rabbit Trap in terms of the filmmaking are the films of Nick Roeg, who I think doesn't really get enough love. He made Don't Look Now, which is just an amazing, spooky horror grief, a riff on grief in Venice. It's lovely. He also did a movie called Walkabout in Australia, which is just one of the great nature films. Walkabout is David Gulpilil, who was an Indigenous Australian actor, and it's him and a couple of kids walking through the desert. It's got this very strange, fable-like quality to it, but the way he uses the nature is so alive in that movie. He also did The Witches, the original version of The Witches.
Yeah, that was scary. And he did Man Who Fell to Earth as well, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. Yeah, and Performance with Mick Jagger, which is amazing. Anyway, I just think Nick Roeg needs more love. Go watch Nick Roeg movies.
Perfect. Excellent.
Yeah.
And where can people find you online, or people want to find you or your work or anything like that?
Yeah, I have Instagram. I'm not very active, unfortunately. I'm really bad at social media, but I have one. It's just at Bryn Chainey, and I've put all of my short films on my website, which is brynchaney.com. There's some music videos I directed there as well, so people can go there.
Brilliant. And Rabbit Trap's on Prime in the UK. How can people get it in other countries?
I don't know.
Is it out in the US?
It is in the US.
First,
I don't know. Yeah, it's on Canopy in the US. It might be also on like Apple TV. I don't know. I use this website called Stream with VPN, which you can like put in a movie and it will tell you where it's streaming in different countries. So you can check out whichever country you're in. You can be like, where is Rabbit Trap streaming? And it will tell you. So
brilliant. Yeah, because I really would urge everyone who's listening to Vayse at the moment to watch that movie if you haven't already, because it really is a fantastic film. And if people want to find more Vayse, if for example, you found this podcast because you're a huge fan of Bryn, you can find us on Instagram at Vayse, then Vayse spelled backwards. So that's at VAYSEESYAV. We're on YouTube now at Vayse Podcast. We're on Blue Sky. I don't really use that anymore. We're kind of on Twitter or X or whatever it is, but we haven't really posted on there for a long time. Our episodes are available on all podcasting platforms. But if you want the full show notes, which should be really interesting for this episode, go to www.vayse.co.uk, where all the episodes plus all the full show notes are. If you want to email us to talk to us about anything, give us any ideas, tell us your experiences, you can get us on vaseinfo@gmail.com. I'm a little bit behind on replying to people, but I do try to reply to everyone. The soundtrack done by Stephen James Buckley himself, Polypause, who we've talked about Buckley's music quite a bit in this episode. All the music for Vayse from the first 2 seasons is available on Bandcamp, and you can get a link to that through our website. And of course, as we said at the beginning, if you want to support us and you want some extra content, a little bit more Vayse in your life, you can support us on Ko-Fi. And for a small monthly donation, you get access to our Discord. You get the bonus episodes, or it's a completely different podcast called the PK Files that we do every month, where we take guidance from the Oracle, the Peanut King, to discuss what we to discuss for an hour the themes that are given to us. So yeah, any help to keep the podcast running is greatly appreciated. So thank you, listeners. We really appreciate everyone who's listening, by the way, and everyone who supports us. You're absolute heroes, and we are in your debt because we really enjoy doing this, and we want to be able to carry on.
We're not literally in your debt.
No,
don't come knocking.
No, don't come asking. We're not going to fight anything. But thanks very much, Bryn, for everything.
Yeah, cheers, Bryn. It's been great.
You've been so generous with your time and your ideas, and it's been such a pleasure. I love it when you get to speak to someone whose art you appreciate, and you find that they're very much on your wavelength. I could talk to you for literally hours. It's been fantastic.
I really appreciate it.
I do have one more question before you go.
Go on.
So, who would win in a fight between the unnamed fairy creature in Rabbit Trap and one of those little fairies on Labyrinth that bites Sarah? Who do you think is
which
more
ones?
powerful?
Which are the guys who bite Sarah? Where?
The ones right at the start that Hoggle's squirting with the little squirter.
Oof. Okay. I think our kid from Rabbit Trap would take them, because I think our child. I mean, the unnamed child in Rabbit Trap isn't just a child. He also kind of has influence over nature. You know, there are some strange nature things that grow and shift and change. So I think he could invoke some strange forces that would, you can't win a fight against nature. So if you can control nature, you win.
Yeah. So the answer really is that they team up and we all lose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah, because I think your creature, your fairy, is almost like a higher tier of fairy, whereas the Labyrinth ones are just like almost like drone fairies. They're just kind of going around.
They're not the fairy world.
Yeah. They're parasites. Just parasites.
Excellent.
Good. I'm glad we cleared that up.
Yeah, me too.
It's important we get everyone's view on these things. You know, these are the things that really matter. Vayse.